let's start again. Welcome everybody. We're continuing our series on the Creator, and today we're going to be talking about the evidence for creation. And since we're going to addressing our youth in a special way today, I want to show you one verse of the Bible and begin with it. It's found in Ecclesiastes 12, chapters 1 to 2, which says, "Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days comes and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them, while the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain." Now, we're not going to be trying to study this chapter, but basically what the text says is that we should remember our Creator while we are still young, because once we get old, things will look different, and we will wish that we had remembered our Creator in our youth. Seća se Stvoritelja svog u mladosti svojoj. Tako, text. Many times when people who believe in creation or people who believe in the evolution, when they discuss things, discussion becomes a little tense. But the main problem is that they're using pretty much the same evidence that they're fighting about. But one side interprets that evidence in one way, while the other side is interpreting that evidence in the other way, as it's supporting his side, whether it's creationism or evolutionists. So we're dealing with same, not same arguments, but same input, same evidence, same artifacts, whether it's dinosaur bones or it's layers, in the rock strata or anything else. We have the exact same thing, same nature surrounding us. So the question is basically, what is the right way to interpret that nature? It's pretty much like in the Christian world. We all have one Bible, but some people interpret it one way, some the other. So we're dealing with the same evidence. The way is, how do we read that evidence? What is the proper way to read it? Now, the problem is that none of us have been there when these things happen. Whether rocks being formed, well, we can see some volcanoes, erupting and rocks being formed. But basically, when we study these things, we haven't been there. None of us had seen it. So how do we interpret that? Now, I'll give you one example. And it's about the age of Xyron crystals in granite. So there's these specific crystals that could be used to date granite rocks. And these crystals could be interpreted to be around 1.5 billion years old, based on the amount of lead produced from the decay of uranium. So as the uranium is decaying, the lead is being produced, and when they measure that, they can establish the number of years. And some scientists, predominantly evolutionists or theistic evolutionists, would date this rock to be about 1.5 billion years old. Now, when creationist approaches this rock, he says this. He says, okay, the decay of uranium also produces helium, not just lead. And when we measure helium and the amount of it, we get completely different data, much less, and it falls more into a category of the rock that's less than 6,000 years old. And so they're both interpreting the same thing. There's this crystal in the rock, but one side measures this the one way, excluding the other factors, while the other side says, well, there's also this chemical element present, and it's helium, and if you measure that element, then the rock appears to be much younger, within several thousand years. There's no billion years present. So basically, it all depends on the way we interpret things, and what we want to emphasize and what we do not want to emphasize. And I'll be very open. There's There's many things that evolutionists have emphasized wrongly, but there's things that even creationists had emphasized with more emphasis than it should have been. And some things looked like they wanted them to look like, so they kind of made a big news about it, only to be discovered later on that it wasn't really factual. So we have to be very careful. But I want to tell you today that there is a very easy way about this. We don't all have to be scientists to figure this all out. Now, another example of how we interpret things differently, it's just think of CNN and Fox News. CNN is more a liberal news channel, and Fox News is more conservative, right? And sometimes, you know, they will interpret the exact same event in a completely two different ways. And one side will say how there were there, I don't know, 100,000 people, and the other side will say that there were a few thousand people. Or if there was something happening, something negative, one side will not talk about it or just briefly mention it, while the other side will make that a main point and maybe exclude some other good things. So it's just the matter of how we want to present certain side. So again, we have to be careful in biblical studies, and we need to be fair. We need to say that there are things that we know and things that we don't know that are mystery to us. And we are not to forget when we talk about creator and creation that it's beyond us. Universe is beyond our understanding. Most of it we don't know and understand. Even the greatest and the best scientists in the world, they know very little about our universe, and they admit to it. So we have to keep humble when we talk about this. And myself, I personally need to stay humble because I'm not creationist myself. I'm not a scientist. You know, I read things, I read books, I read online, you know, and I'm trying to fairly present to you some of the newest information. Now, I can stand behind the Bible because, you know, that's my degree, and I'm more comfortable there. But here I need to remain humble. So how do we interpret the universe? What is the proper way to approach this subject when there is all these complex studies and none of us, or most of us, are not really even able to interpret it? If the scientist came, you know, and started talking to me, I couldn't argue with him because, you know, I don't know it except for what I read in the scientific journals. But the point is that in the rush to examine all these amazing scientific evidence, it's easy to lose sight of the big picture. And that's what I would like us to deal with today. What are the easy things? How can we show the evidence for the Creator God in a very easy way? I'll take you to Proverbs 1:7. Proverbs 1:7 tells us, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So početak znanja je strah Gospodnji. This text tells us that it has to start with God. And even on this excellent website that I'm going to tell you about later on, the best and the brightest scientists in this field, they're telling us we need to remain humble and put God first. Because science can go so far. It's about revelation. It must come from God. We don't know much about these things. It's bigger than us. So for us Christians, it really needs to begin with God. We need revelation about these things. It's like you don't know anything about cars. You have to go to get a training to be able to fix the car, right? You don't know. So same here. We need to go to the one who created everything. And the beginning of knowledge, Bible tells us, starts with God. So what is God telling us? Now, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, we read, previous time we studied this verse, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So the basic premise is that God created it. And for us who believe in creation, as described in the Bible, God is behind it. Now, evolutionists, they took God out of the picture, and they're trying to come up with some kind of a mechanism that would bring about, the creation of the universe. But for us, it starts with God, and it makes things much more simpler. Now, what is important in the creation account, and I underscored last time, we lightly go over this fact that God says that when He created everything, He kind of looked back, and the text says, then God saw everything that He had made, and indeed it was what? Very good. You see, Christians believe that whatever was created very good. Now, what about evolutionists? No, they talk about some disorganized, huge mass of bubble of chemicals that, eventually created explosion, and out of that explosion you had a big mess, and somehow everything came together over 14 billions of years, and we got our universe and our planet. So evolution starts with a complete disaster, with complete disorganized mass of elements and chemicals. And this picture is even better than what they're starting with, the right side, I mean. But Bible starts with something that's perfect and very good. So it's a complete opposite. What we are saying is God created everything good, and we ruined it, right? And things are still falling apart. Nature is being destroyed, right? We don't know what we eat. We don't know what we breathe. We don't know what our brains are turning into. We are eating stuff they're saying that not even food. Our body doesn't know what to do with the GMO stuff. Even hybridized, wheat and other crops. Our bodies, scientists are saying, they're looking at it, and it's like, I don't know, this looks like something, but it ain't wheat. It ain't food. I have no enzymes. I don't know what to do with this. Who created this, right? And that's why some go so far to say that that's not even food. That's not even real grain. Anyway, maybe we can talk some other time about health. But that's our point of view. Everything was perfect. God said, when I created it, it was perfect and beautiful. Now, evolutionists, they're saying, no, there was nothing, and now it's becoming better and better. And just by simple point of observational point, is everything getting better or worse? Well, in my short lifespan, I can see that everything's getting much worse. And you can just go and look at the pictures of, how our planet used to look like 50 years ago, and how it looks like today, and you'll see about destruction of forests and everything, erosions and quality of air, water, everything. Life conditions on this planet are just being degraded. Now, when we talk about the evidence of God, in theology, we talk about general and special revelation. So we're not going to go into some heavy theology, but I just want you to know the basic approach. How do we approach this subject? It's not just about looking at the little things, because I'm telling you, most scientists will just win the argument with me if we talk science. So, but that's not a point. Let's look at a big picture. Let's look at the whole thing. It's like looking at a piano and a little screw, and we argue about a screw. And then somebody comes and says, okay, let's play piano. Do you know that, this thing can make music? And let's step back and let's listen to the music, right? So screws are not as important. As a matter of fact, our piano is probably missing a few screws and other things. It's very old piano. But it's playing. It's making beautiful music. So maybe we won't figure out every screw, every string, everything. But we can hear the music. So that's what I'm about. I don't like dealing with very minor things that it's hard to understand. So to begin with, when we talk about general revelation of God, we talk about nature as the first thing. And that's closely related to creation. So when we think about nature, we see the complexity of life. Things they just work together. You remove one little thing, and everything goes down. Do you know why I don't like spraying too much around my house? spraying against the spiders? Stefan? How does it destroy my plants? Well, that's one thing, but I'll tell you another thing. When you kill bugs, when you kill those ants and those spiders, my nice garden gets attacked by some other bugs, and there's nobody to take care of them. You know, there's a disbalance in my backyard ecosystem. And because there's no spiders and there's no ants and these other bugs that eat bad bugs, I get attacked by bad bugs, and then my tomato, my grapes, or whatever I have there, they suffer. And we call that the complexity of life. It's not like you can create one thing and the other thing will work. Everything has to work in one accord. So how was it possible for everything to evolve when things can work only together? It's like human body. Think of the human body. What happens if you take one organ out? I mean, there's some you can live with one kidney, but you take your liver, heart, whatever, brain, it's not going to work. I mean, you can die just by cutting off one finger if you don't take care of it properly. So everything must work together. Even, you know, sphincters, there's two. You know, one is at the upper part of our stomach and one below. And if they malfunction, you can die. Just one little pochlopat. You know, and if that valve doesn't work, you know, stuff from your intestines and colon back up into your stomach and you die. Just one little thing. So what was created first? Our intestines, our colon, our sphincters, you know, valves, whatever. What was created first? There's no answer. Everything had to be created together. So when we talk about it, we talk about complexity of life. Another term that we are using is fine-tuning of the universe. You know, everything is moving, things are flying there, yet we are still here, right? And then you've heard it so many times, if we were just slightly closer to the sun or slightly farther away, life wouldn't be possible. So it had to be just perfect. The amount of oxygen, the temperature, you know, the pulling force of the gravitational force, everything had to be just perfect for life to be possible on this planet. And again, just look at the things in nature. We ruin a little bit of something and disaster is happening. So who did that? Who tuned the universe in such a fine way? Would it be possible to have it so well tuned without somebody behind? That's the main question that we are asking. It's not possible. If you explain to me how could an instrument like this you know, become a product of explosion, you know, then I can explain to you how is that possible with the universe, and it's not, right? Anything that is intelligent, that shows some intelligence, must be created by somebody who is even more intelligent than that, right? So that's what we mean when we talk about fine-tuning of the universe. And the last thing, balance in nature, I think I covered that. This is what Psalm 19:1 and 2, and kids, I'd like you to read this with me. So the right side says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims His handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge." So the Bible tells us when we look at the sky and above, whether during the day or during the night, it reveals God to us. And that's why, you know, people from ancient times, when they looked at the universe, they were amazed. And they had different ideas who God could be, but they knew there must be God because everything looked so immense, so amazing, so wonderfully made that in their mind, you know, somebody had to be behind that. So nature is still, even though it's being degraded still, nature still witnesses for God. There's that unexplainable beauty, design in nature. When you look at the butterfly, when you look at a tiger, there's a design to everything, and nice smells. It looks like somebody who was filled with love surrounded us with beautiful nature that produces wonderful emotions. So it's really more than the sum of its parts. And you know what I mean by that, I hope. Now, another thing that we mention under general revelation is human beings. You know, when you think of human beings, and I said about it again, you know, you just look at how we were created. Human eye, human brain. It's just an amazing thing. I think I said it many times that for philosophers, one of the greatest enigma is human mind, not human brain. And you know what is the difference between human brain and human mind? Brain is a physical organ. Mind is our thoughts, our memory, our emotions. How is that possible? This is just a physical organ, and then you have something, a world of its own in our brains that is not a brain. It's our mind that kind of functions within that hardware. You know what I mean? It's unexplainable. We still cannot explain how that works. Intelligence, reason. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Even a little insect is unbelievable, but human brain, how it operates and functions, it just, you know, it's hard to not think that God must have created something as complex as we are. And then the history, here we are talking about a Bible, historical accounts in the Bible. When we look at the historical accounts, including Jesus Christ appearing in this world, so we have that general revelation of God who revealed himself in history through his prophets, through the Word, and through archaeology, we could say, because archaeological remains are giving us evidence for some things. Biblical stories, the existence of the cities, the biblical accounts, and so on and so forth. But I would add to this geology as well, because we're going to deal briefly with geology. So the Word of God is the key. It's one of the keys, because that's the way God was revealed to us. One is through the nature, through the way He created, but God also gave us a written Word. He wanted us to understand some of it. And then there's other things that we call special revelation. We're not going to deal with them, but they're very important because God only revealed Himself not only in a general way, but in a very special way. By coming here, right? In the Old Testament, we see Him revealing Himself in a burning bush or in a Shekinah, in the tent, speaking on the Sinai. He came in Jesus Christ, in the body of Jesus Christ, so incarnate God. The Holy Spirit came down. So all these things are the special revelation of God. So God can be tested. So it's not just that there is data out there, but we are disconnected and we can have our own ideas. We can come to God, we can pray, and we can test whether that's true. Yes, Jesus lived 2,000 years ago, but the Bible is telling us about the Holy Spirit. And if we pray for a blessing and for guidance, God promised to do that. So we can experience the presence of God and we can test whether the promises in the Bible will come to its fruition. That's why, again, we must start with God. It all begins with whether God exists or not. If we resolve that, whether God exists or not, then we solved half of the puzzle. Then we have to deal with the theistic evolution. We'll deal more with it the next time, but a little bit today. Now, Romans 1:20, kids, read with me, also says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them." So the Bible is telling us that everything was shown in a very plain way. Not complex. We don't need to be scientists. There's a very easy way that's been offered to us. And the next verse says, "For His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so that they are without what? Without excuse." Now, this is a big statement by Apostle Paul. He says that we are pretty much without excuse. Everything is so plain in the nature and around us. Everything has been revealed. And they were not scientists. He says everything was so simply revealed Everybody should be able to know, just based on observing the nature, that God created everything, that there is God. Now, the question that comes up in these discussions is whether the earth is old or young. Now, if the earth is young, then we are arguing for the Creator God. Now, if the earth is old, then evolutionists can use their mechanisms to say how over so many billions of years these things could have happened. Because the basic premise is this: yes, that is impossible. You cannot observe it within the 100 years or something. But with the time, over the course of millions and billions of years, eventually things will come together, chemicals will connect, and it's possible. So it's generally not possible, but over the long period of time, it'll eventually happen. That's their idea. Which, of course, we reject because we're not talking about a little thing. I mentioned piano. People sometimes use a clock as an example. Even as simple thing as that, I don't think can be created by chance over the course of the billions of years. But life as complex as is, impossible. So what about the age of the earth? What do we know about it? Now, Bible proposes the young age of the earth. At least conservative scholars look at it like that, and Seventh-day Adventist Church teaches that the earth is old about 6,000 years, while the older proponents, they teach that our universe is about 14 billion years, but our planet about 4.5 billion years. Now, what is actually factual here? Now, Bible tells us that God created everything in 6 days. And next time we're going to talk about those days, whether they're literal or not. Now we're just going to assume, like I believe, that they're literal. There's no indications that they're not. So God created everything in 6 days. So we know that Adam was created on day 6, right? And so there were 5 days before him, and if we add up the days from Adam to Abraham, we will get about 2,000 years based on the account of the Bible. And most scholars agree that Abraham was born or lived about 2000 BC. So, two things to remember. Between creation and Abraham, there's 2,000 years, according to the Bible. And scholars, religious and secular, agree that Abraham lived about 2000 BC. So if this is true, then simple calculation tells us that there's 5 days, Adam was, before the creation of Adam. And then from Adam to Abraham, there's 2,000 years. And since Abraham lived around 2000 BC, there's another 4,000 years to our time, right? And this is all approximately. That's what this little, wiggly sign tells us. So approximately 6,000 years, if we made a graph, this is how it would look like. Adam was created in about 4,000 BC. Abraham lived around 2000 BC. And we are here at 2018 AD, which altogether makes up about 6,000 plus years. So it's an approximate calculation, but that's pretty much what it is according to the Bible. Now, what evidence do we have that the earth is young? So we're not going to be dealing, some creationists say it's about 6,000 years old, some say less than 10,000 years old, but doesn't matter. Do we have any evidence that the earth is actually young? I'll give you 3 number 1 evidences for young earth. There's others, and I'm going to direct you to this website. This is by far the best website that I stumbled upon ever that deals with creation or issues in origins, as we would say at the seminary. So if you'd like to read about the creationism and biblical perspective and top-notch science, I mean top-notch. It's not very complicated. It's written for us to understand, but it's written by top-notch world scholars. Go to this website. I haven't read everything. There's so much. They have their magazine and everything. But it's just amazing. I was blown away. Excellent explanations, excellent balanced arguments, pictures, everything. Evidence number one that they're saying, they're giving 10, but number one is very little sediments on the seafloor. So I wanted to bypass those standard arguments that we are using and look at some new ones. So what about sediments on the seafloor? If sediments have been accumulating on the seafloor for 3 billion years, for example, as some are claiming, the seafloor should be choked with sediments many miles deep. So we see today that sediments are being, just constantly they're being accumulated. And if they were being accumulated at that rate, there would be so much sediments at the bottom of the seafloor that it would go miles deep. Now, is that a case? That's not a case at all, And here on this graph, they show you how water and wind erosion add about 20 billion tons to the bottom, and then because of the tectonic plate movement, about 1 billion is lost, but then again, a lot is left. So they're saying if they were being accumulated at this rate, there would be 250 times more sediment than we see today. The amount of the sediments at the seafloor or the ocean floor that we see today witnesses to the much, much younger Earth that's within several thousand years. So it really, goes in support of what Bible teaches. Now, this is the wrong place for this. This is something else. So this evidence makes sense within the context of the Genesis flood cataclysm. So how could these things happen otherwise? When they look at these sediments, they're realizing, okay, things have not really, there was no constant in the past. There must have been a flood. Because when you look at the rocks, when you look at the sediments and all those other things in geology, you really needed to have either so many billions of years or you needed to have a cataclysm for that to happen. And I'll show you why is that really more likely concept. Now Luke 17:27 tells us, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be also in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Now we have all these things that are being connected to flood today, as the scientists, Christian scientists are being studying them. But I'm wondering, in the days of Noah, when the flood was happening, people were how? People were relaxed. Like, oh, flood, it won't even happen, right? So in the same way, as we are studying these things, most people are, just ignorant and they're not interested. They don't want to, they just are behaving in the same way. They're living their lives, getting married, and building their families, not paying attention to God. And I just want to kind of warn all of us that we shouldn't be having that attitude, because we may end up like them, surprised and eventually destroyed. And there's all this evidence surrounding us so that we wouldn't end up like that. Now, another very interesting evidence for creation, and this is really amazing, and that slide actually belonged to this group, one of them, is rock bent layers. Now, what is this about? In many mountainous areas, rock layers thousands of feet thick have been bent and folded without fracturing. How can that happen? If they were laid down separately over hundreds of millions of years and already hardened. So you have these formations, and as you can see, this is sediment, layered rocks, and you can see how it kind of collapsed. You can see that how it goes down, climbs up, and it goes even 90 degrees up. You don't see cracks, you don't see anything. If you brought a evolutionist here, geologist, he would tell you that it took I don't know how many billions of years for this to be accumulated, for these sediments. Now, how is that possible when you have all these, bent rock here appearing? Because if it was an earthquake or anything else, it would crack, it would crash in pieces. You cannot bend rock. Just take a concrete slab and try to bend it and see what's going to happen. So how come that we have these formations? There's only one explanation, and it's flood. And it's volcanoes. And when we read about flood, it wasn't just water from above. It's water from underneath, and probably volcanoes, eruptions, and everything. And rocks started melting and becoming soft. And at that time, at the time of the huge, enormous catastrophe, those rocks then can bend and change their form. And we are talking about all these rocks that they're saying are all several billions of years old. No, it's more likely that this was created within the short period of time all together and bent and left like that. And this is why the young earth concept, when we look at the rocks, really makes more sense. Evolutionists, they don't want to talk about it, or they're going to interpret it in much different way. I'll show you this picture that I skipped just before. It's important. This is a part of the Grand Canyon, and you have that plateau at the beginning, and you have all these sandstone, shale rocks, limestone, so different rocks over the top of each other. And they would say, oh, it took billions of years for all those rocks to become formed. But at one point you have slope, and you have huge curving going down, and it just continues. There's no cracks, no anything. How did this happen? The only explanation is that these rocks were actually formed in a very short period of time, or that there was a catastrophe that melted all these and kind of bent them together, and then kind of formed those layers. So again, the flood approach makes sense in this context. Saying that this was all, created by, like, if it was completely straight, then we could say, okay, it was just being accumulated on the top of each other. And it's all over America. This is important. This is not just in Grand Canyon. We can see this. You can see this yellow area is the area where all these bent rocks were discovered. So it's all over the United States. And some other amazing pictures. Look at this. Yeah. Again, when we talk about accumulation of sediments, they must be straight. If they're bent, that raises questions. So if the Earth's fossil-bearing sediment layers were laid down over 460 millions of years, they could not be bent without breaking. The only answer is young Earth, catastrophe, something. Look at this. Look at these rocks going upwards, and these going, almost like making half a circle or something. Just what happened there? Look at this. This is in Denver, Colorado. You can see how the whole huge piece of, mountain, whatever, it was just pushed up. The whole thing. Because it's going diagonally. All strata goes this way. It's not like that. And so you're going to tell me it was formed like that over the billions of years? It can't. It just can't. We were just at the Lesson Volcanic National Park, and I think my rocks are in my car, and it's too late for now. I brought some rocks from there, because you can see there they give you 5 different types of stone that they explain there. The youngest one, a little bit older, and then older, and they're in different colors. Some of them are light gray, dark gray, red, black. So we collected all of them. Why? Because there's a volcano there that was producing and pushing out all these different rocks and creating those layers. So how fast can a volcano create a layer? In a few days. Just spits out some lava and there is a layer. So it doesn't need really, that's one simple example showing that you don't need billions of years for that to be created. interesting scripture in Luke chapter 19 says, "And some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, rebuke your disciples.' He answered, 'I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out.'" And you know that stones are really crying out. When we look at the rocks and geological strata, we find amazing things that witness to the existence of young earth, of the Creator God, and that it shows that the account of the Bible makes much more sense than any other fanciful research out there that is trying to disapprove God and the account that Bible gives us. And the third and the last amazing evidence is soft tissue in fossils. The premise is if dinosaurs lived over 65 million years ago, why do some dinosaur fossils still contain well-preserved soft tissues? Evolutionists have no answer to this. Like if they were 65 million years old, you could have no soft tissues preserved, no little blood vessels, no bone marrow preserved. It's impossible. They would all agree with that. So why do we find them? And this is just a very recent, towards the end of the 20th century, this lady scientist had discovered Tyrannosaurus in the Hell Creek, Montana, and they found a pretty well-preserved dinosaur, and she studied its bone, and especially bone marrow, and she found something amazing, and you can see in these pictures, maybe next pictures, she found preserved soft tissues, little blood vessels. And she's thinking, no, this can't be 65 million years old. This is within few thousands of years, 5,000 of years. It can be older. Otherwise, these soft, we would have nothing like it. Even DNA, they can study it under the microscope. How is that possible? Evolutionists have no answer. They don't offer it because there is none. Even on the top of that, you know what this is? This is the dinosaur skin preserved. How is that possible? If dinosaur died, how much time does it take for strata to pile up over him? Well, they're saying millions of years. Wouldn't he decompose completely in that time and somebody would have eaten him? This shows that some disaster, immediate catastrophe happened, buried him under, and preserved him. And that it was a fairly recent event, several thousands of years, because his skin was preserved, his bone marrow is preserved, and soft tissues, in his body were preserved, which is the evidence of a very recent thing, and that's why we know and believe that dinosaurs didn't live 65 million of years ago. They lived maybe 5,000 years ago. Job 12 says, "But now ask the beasts, and they will teach you." I would say ask this dinosaur. "And the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Oh, speak to the earth, and it will teach you, and the fish of the sea will explain to you." So really, when we look at the rocks, when we look at a fossil record, animals, if you wish, they teach us about God. They teach us about intelligent design. They teach us about recent creation. We don't have scientific support for the Bible. It's a matter of faith. But once again, Bible turns out to be correct and more factual. It makes more sense. If carefully and without bias we try to read the nature around us, we will see that Bible makes sense. And this whole battle between creation versus evolution is nothing else than the rebellion against God. And Darwin himself, when you read him, he writes in his books and memoirs how he can't believe that God could have created this when there is this in nature, animals eating each other and whatnot. We know that that's a product of sin. We know that everything was perfect when God created it. But when man sinned, then we got thorns and thistles and everything else. The nature changed. Nature wasn't the same after the fall of sin, after the fall of Adam and Eve. But before chapter 1, everything was perfect. So this whole battle is really not scientific battle. It's really about believing in God or not, whether God exists or whether He doesn't exist. Because if we say that the earth is young, you know what? There is no way that Big Bang would be able to happen or even explain the things. Because they know this can happen within 6,000 years. They need billions of years to give more chance to happen. But within few thousands of years, they know if the earth is that young, that somebody must have created it. Right? And again, Ecclesiastes 12:1 says, "Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come." I want to really encourage our youth, as well as all of us, to remember our Creator, to read our nature correctly. There is a right way to read nature. And to be amazed by it, because the Bible tells us that nature witnesses about our Creator. And that's why the Spirit of Prophecy tells us that we should take frequent walks in nature, especially on Sabbath days, because nature witnesses about God. We just need to read it. Sometimes we are overwhelmed with our thoughts and problems. We don't pay attention to the flower, to the butterfly, or just even trying to learn to read rocks. Because now that you know this, next time you go to the Grand Canyon, you're going to be looking at those sediment layers of the sediment rocks. You're going to remember this. Now, it's interesting that in the story of David and Goliath, Goliath came as a huge guy with the best armor and strongest armor, and David had no chance. But what did David have? 5 simple rocks. So kids, in this battle, yes, Steph, David had faith. That's true. In this battle, we don't need fancy explanations. Not even these that I presented. We need faith in God. Even few simple rocks will help. Jesus said that the rocks will speak for Him. Nature witnesses for Him. And for those who want to learn about God and to recognize God in nature, Bible tells us they can. So I just want to challenge you to go and look for God and to take your stand in this battle, because you're going to be studying in school probably about the evolution. I would really like you to know, to have some facts and some biblical worldview so that when question arises, you can look at it from a different perspective and perhaps come back to your pastor or ask me again about that website, and we go read together, because we need to stand up for God. We are His representatives here, and we need to help people understand that Bible is the best choice. That the way the creation was explained in the Bible is the best and the most logical way. So may God help you as you continue to serve Him and to learn about Him, so that we can truly see Him as the Creator of this world, and that we can share that with many. Amen.